What's going on, everybody? You're watching The Island Ricks TV 2, incorporated with Astronaut Music Beats. And I would like to discuss with you all why I believe Terence Crawford will lose before he faces Errol the True Spence. Now, I've stated countless of times on this channel, on my previous channel, my main channel, which is The Island Ricks TV. I've stated countless times that I just felt like Errol Spence is just on another level, and I think that he's much better than Terence Crawford. I've stated that I felt like Terence Crawford is overrated in my opinion. Once again, this is my opinion, which isn't, illegal to state your own opinion, at least not yet. But I've stated countless times that I believe that Terence Crawford is overrated only when it comes to Errol the True Spence, because I feel like Errol the True Spence is, steps ahead in terms of being on a chessboard. Everything that, Terence Crawford can do, Errol Spence could do much better, whether that's power, whether that's angles, and even with Errol Spence and Errol Spence's performance versus, Danny Garcia, he did a great job in terms of his defense, slipping punches, and I'll get into that later on. But I just believe that, and everything, a lot of things that I say, you see happen over a period of time. And if you go to, just type in The Island Ricks TV and Errol Spence and go back in the archives and just look at all of my videos to where when Kareem Mayfield was calling out Errol Spence and all these guys was, saying Errol Spence was overrated. And I was just telling you guys how how the tables would eventually turn, and how Keith Thurman was just chasing Mayweather and Pacquiao during the time when Errol Spence was calling them out. He was only calling, this was years ago, remind you, probably like 2017, 2016, but I told everybody that the reason he was calling them out because he was trying to, get a payday. He was trying to be like Money Mayweather. So he was doing all this, and he just reminded me of a WWE character. And Keith Thurman, you seen him doing videos, I think he was playing the flute or something like that, and I just never took him serious. And I gained respect for Keith Thurman after the Pacquiao fight. I'm talking about in terms of his fighting and his performance, because the way he fought back against Manny Pacquiao. I still think that Keith Thurman has a lot of questionable ways, and the way he carries himself, like, acting like he's injured and things like that. So to me, he does a lot of questionable things, but that's, to me, I still think along the line, down the road, Errol Spence should still face him. However, I felt as though I told everybody that the tables would turn and eventually he would get desperate because the money runs out. The money that he probably earned against Pacquiao, it'll eventually run out. And you're going to need Errol Spence because Errol Spence, once again I say, is going to become the cash cow in the face of boxing. He has Al Heyman behind him. So when you have those type of powers behind you, they're going to put you in position to get to another level, and they have the right connections to keep you in the spotlight and to take you to that next level the same way he did with Money Mayweather. So Errol Spence right now, to me, is pound for pound the best boxer in the world. His resume proves it. We looking at Terence Crawford compared to Errol Spence. I truly don't believe that Terence Crawford deserves a fight with Errol Spence yet. He doesn't. And like I said, Terence Crawford came out and did an interview, and he was like, I'm just paraphrasing, but he was like, I don't think Errol Spence is, who they proclaiming him to be, or and instead of saying that he could expose Errol Spence flaws, he said he could exploit his flaws or something like that, he said. And I'm just paraphrasing. But he just basically was trying to say that he could defeat Errol Spence, and he's not hyped up to be what everybody is, praising him to be. And I was stating back then that people were jealous of how when Errol Spence was coming up, he got so much respect because he was calling these guys out. He was regarded as the boogeyman. So by him being regarded as the boogeyman, a lot of people didn't like the praise that he was getting because he was earning it. He was willing to fight the best of the best. He went over to the UK in uncharted territory, unfamiliar territory, on in the UK with a bunch of fans. I think they was in Wembley, bunch of fans going against Errol Spence, and you had, Kell Brook, who would not fight him. He took on Triple G, and then Errol Spence fought him on a 9-month layoff. It wasn't in no bubble. Kell Brook was washed by time, I'm talking about really washed by time Terence Crawford fought him. But Errol Spence fought him on his own turf, took his belt, and still ate a brownie on live because they was throwing brownies at him. But Errol Spence is just on another level, and I've said this countless of times. But like I said, I believe that Terence Crawford is going to lose before he faces Errol Spence, and here's my reason. This man went, first and foremost, he went, I think, 10 rounds with a guy with one leg and Jose Benavidez, right? Then on top of that, we talking about a guy who fought Mean Machine, who nobody even knows, and Mean Machine was able to drop him. We never seen Terence Crawford in a fight where he faced someone who applied enormous amounts of pressure like a Sean Porter. Now, we seen Errol Spence fight Sean Porter's fight and still come out with the victory. I felt like Errol Spence should have boxed him, and I think he would have made it easier on himself. But Errol Spence beat fighters at their own game. I thought versus Danny Garcia, he would, try to out counterpunch him. But Errol Spence defeat fighters at their own game. And versus, what was I saying? Oh, yeah, Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford doesn't deserve the fight with Errol Spence, period. No matter how you cut it, slice it, or dice it. Errol Spence has proven that he could beat fighters at their own game. And we never seen, I lost my train of thought, so now I'm picking back up, right? But Terence Crawford, right, we never seen him versus, face enormous amounts of pressure. And we see Errol Spence versus Sean Porter and see how he was able to handle that, right? If the roles are reversed, right, will Terence Crawford be able to handle that amount of pressure that Sean Porter is putting on him? Now, we've seen him get dropped by Mean Machine, but to me, he's accustomed to fighters standing in the middle of the ring trying to beat him at a chess match, trying to go tit for tat in the middle of the ring. You see what I'm saying? He did that versus Kell Brook, whether that was Amir Khan. We seen that versus Gamboa. Like, what fighter, or even Jose Benavidez, like, how many people have you seen him in a just go apply pressure to him and walk him down? You haven't seen it. So, like I said, I believe that you have a guy in Sean Porter who is going to harass him and just bully him for a full 12 rounds, and I think that could result into a loss. Now, I could be wrong, but I think that will end up resulting in a loss. And if he does win, it's not going to be pretty, but I'm predicting that he loses. And if he doesn't lose to Sean Porter, I do believe that he will eventually lose before he gets to Errol Spence, because one, Bob Arum, once you already, give him, indication that any form of indication that you're trying to leave, he's going to make sure you lose in some way. That's just Bob Arum's MO. So I think that Terence Crawford is going to lose before he even get to fight Errol Spence. Let's say I'm wrong. Let's hope that I'm wrong. But Errol Spence is just on another level. Even versus Danny Garcia, he proved to be on another level, considering the circumstances. He just came off a car accident. He said that he would defeat Danny Garcia even at 75%. And it's safe to say, since everybody felt like Errol Spence didn't dominate like they felt like he should have, I felt like I gave Errol Spence an A. Initially, I gave him an A-, but I changed it into an A plus. I mean, an A. I'm sorry, because I felt like I went back and watched the fight, and I felt like Errol Spence was just sharp, and I think defensively, to me, is what stood out the most. And the reason defensively he stood out the most because if I think that he didn't want to take no unnecessary punishment after the car accident, and also he was hesitant because he knew that Danny Garcia is a great counterpuncher, so he didn't want to get hit with any shots and just leaving himself open. But I just think that during that fight early on, he dictated the pace. He used his jab. He eventually started to work the body. He got closed the distance and was able to land some big shots, to get Danny Garcia attention. He was, walking him down. He was cutting off the ring. He was using angles, moving from side to side. He was moving his head. He kept his arms up. His arms was tight. His chin was tucked. He was slipping shots, catching shots on the glove. He was throwing like ones and twos. Like Errol Spence really looked sharp to me, and I think that a lot of people didn't watch it from the perspective that I watched it being as though I ain't gonna say I was like this top-notch fighter, but I have boxed before for 3 years. So it was like, and I started, when I was 16 years old. So I do have, some understanding, a lot of understanding of the game, especially being in there sparring and, fighting a lot of champions. So I do understand. To me, I felt like Errol Spence, it's not even to me. A lot of people that I've talked to, there are some people who be like, oh, he was born. I'm like, that's like, it's the science. If you like the sweet science, then you enjoyed that performance that Errol Spence put on. It seems boring, but he dominated him. And Errol Spence needs to stop. He needs to stop criticizing himself, critiquing himself after the fight, because he has a lot of influence, and his influence may not just, spark or give his haters ammunition, but he just has to stop doing that because his influence may sway people's opinions. Like, he talking about his fight was boring. He gave himself a B. Like, I totally disagree. Or he might have said something, less than that. But I felt as though Errol Spence got an A. And I said an A minus at first. But when I went back and watched the fight, I gave him an A. But all in all, Terence Crawford doesn't deserve a fight with Errol Spence yet. Errol Spence has the better resume. Errol Spence is fighting in stadiums, the better pay-per-view. Even Bob Arum is saying that he's losing money losing money on promoting Terence Crawford. He says Terence Crawford need to promote himself. I think, like, is it Lomachenko, or needs to promote himself like Shakur Stevenson and sell himself? So this is your own promoter saying this. But like I said, I think he's going to lose before he even gets to Errol Spence. And that's not going to, stop them from fighting, because Manny Pacquiao as well already, he lost before he got to Floyd Mayweather. But I think Terence Crawford is going to lose, possibly to Sean Porter, or lose before he gets to Errol Spence. I just think that even still, it doesn't matter. Errol Spence is on a class way above him, and I think a lot of people need to see that. The only thing I said that Terence Crawford has the advantage in over Errol Spence is timing. And speed. That's it. It's just his hand speed. But what beats speed? Timing. Errol Spence has the power advantage. He has the reach advantage, the height advantage. He's just all around a better fighter to me than Terence Crawford. And I think that Errol Spence should stick with his game plan. His defense was sharp. Everything was just sharp. The other night when he fought Danny Garcia, he busted up Danny Garcia's face more than any of the fighters that he fought in terms of elite level fighters. But we need to see Terence Crawford versus some elite level fighters before we determine. He just didn't even be in a conversation with Errol Spence. Errol Spence was like, I'm worried about my chickens, and I'm worried about my horses and things like that, and my ranch. I'm not worried about Terence Crawford. They shouldn't even mention Terence Crawford right now, because, and I'm going to end this video after this. All Errol Spence has to do, right, just based off his resume, he's fought Lamont Peterson. He's fought Mikey Garcia. He's fought Kell Brook. He fought Danny Garcia, Sean Porter. Let's say he just decides to fight Keith Thurman next. Let's say he then fights Manny Pacquiao next. He does it, and let's say Terence Crawford decides, hey, I'm not even going to fight Sean Porter at all. because he says that's his brother or his friend and things like that, which I fought my sister before with the gloves. But anyway, however, let's just say he says, I'm not even going to face Sean Porter. At that point, Errol Spence could be like, I'm the cash cow, I'm the star of boxing, I'm the A-side. Clearly, he done beat Pacquiao, who is the top name in boxing. If Errol Spence wanted to, he could just be like, man, you know what? I'm going up to 160, or I'm going to meet Canelo at a catchweight, and that's going to be my going out fight. He could retire after that because his resume alone would be 10 times better than a lot of fighters. That right there is a stacked resume. You go, all he has to do, if he was to defeat Canelo Alvarez after beating Pacquiao, and just based off back-to-back, like fighting elite level talent, the man could literally retire, considering the accident he's went through. He could literally retire and lead a sport and never have to come back just based off that resume alone. Leave undefeated, leave healthy, and go live a life with his family. You know? And I think during that Danny Garcia fight, he allowed his emotions, I would say, because I think that he wanted to prove that he could knock Danny Garcia out. But to me, as long as you get the victory, I don't care. You know, I care about, I have a favorite fighter, I don't care about them going out there and risking quit, because it's a grueling sport. I've been in there before. And I've seen some of the best fighters, considered the best fighters in the state, get knocked out, get knocked down. It's grueling, you know? But Errol Spence needs to make sure he stays safe. And like I said, I truly believe that Terence Crawford is going to lose before you get to Errol Spence. But that's my opinion. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Y'all get in that comment box. Like, share, subscribe. I'm out.